we're live. I'm here with the martyred Pastor Jim. I hear the martyrdom was greatly exaggerated.
Well,
How you doing?
I'm doing good, Caleb. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Apparently orcas are a protected class on Twitter because when you post "kill them all" and it's about orca whales, you get permabanned with no warnings.
Orca, really? They over orcas.
Yeah. To be fair, the post was just "kill them all," and it was quoting something about orcas, but no warning, no strikes, account gone forever.
This orcas.
Yep.
That's how Catholic Orca maintains his Twitter account.
Yeah,
That's how.
is.
That's the secret. So we're gonna sit down and talk about history today. This comes in with this kind of you studied history, if I remember correctly, correct?
Yes, I did. As far as having a degree in something carries any weight in our circles, I do have a degree in history.
Here's my take on the whole degree thing. If you're a friend, then your degree means something. If you're not a friend, it does not mean anything.
You know what? Friend-enemy distinction is everything.
Yes, it is. But so let's get into this. Zinwo history saying real quick. So what are the so when I read history, I like to start with quotes as I can to the event. If I could find like who was it who wrote the 12 Caesars? Do you remember who that was? Yeah, it was like 12 Caesars. It was it 12 or 11? There was some guy who wrote a book called 12 Caesars. He was Suetonius, yeah. Like Suetonius, that's a good example of history I like to read. If I could find a guy who's like of the time period, writing about the time period, was in either one generation or living memory. That's where I like to start with my history. So, what is that called? And if you can break down like the different degrees away from the event and what those labels are called.
Yeah, so that's called a primary source or a primary document in like when we're talking about studying history. And generally speaking, that is it is the best picture you can get of what it was like in a time period is through a primary source, because they are the closest to it, right? It's you think of terms of phrase from the last 30 years. The phrase booty call and butt dial, in 200 years, people are going to look at those in writings from today and think they meant the same thing. So the closest you can get to it, the better, because they're going to be using the right vernacular for describing what they're talking about. If you can't find primary sources, then we get what are called secondary sources, which is when someone is writing specifically about primary sources, and telling us about them and kind of interpreting them for us. This is a lot more common in archaeology, rather than pure history, and it's something you have to watch out for. Because archaeologists are either the best or the absolute worst people in the field of history. I watched a YouTube short today where the woman was talking about how they kept finding these giant hand axes. Now, the giant hand axe itself is a primary source. The lady telling us about it is a secondary source, and she's like, we don't know if they were ceremonial or religious or just a status symbol. When I look at a giant hand axe and go, oh, there was a giant who needed an axe.
Pretty reasonable.
Right. So that's where you need to watch out for secondary sources, because there's you get the bias of the primary source if it's a written document, and you get the bias of the interpreter of that primary source.
That hand axe example reminds me so much of what I have an issue with, like modern everything. Is that there's no acceptance of, if it's not around today, like it's not the attitude they claim to hold, but really the attitude they have. There were all no giants around today, therefore there were no giants back then. And it's just it's so anti whimsy. on, and it's so stupid.
And I don't have the information in front of me right now, but that anti-whimsy is a coordinated point of view that was enforced by the Smithsonian Institute.
Not surprised.
And a lot of things were destroyed that would point anything that didn't fit with the worldview of the first Smithsonian director, he just destroyed. So a lot of stuff got destroyed that shouldn't have, that would point to things like that. So, where's all the evidence for it? Well, the people who didn't believe it burned it to the ground. Yeah.
I knew I hated him for a good reason. I wasn't sure what the reason was yet, but I knew it'd come. I knew I'd find it eventually, and he just gave it to me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and then you get your tertiary sources, which are generalized. These are your textbooks, your reference books that aren't trying to interpret, but really aren't informative. So those are kind of the three levels that I dealt with when I was learning history, and what that I keep track of as I interact with it.
Mm-hmm. Would someone like Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War? That wouldn't count. I don't think he was witnessing the speeches himself. Obviously, I think he had a counter the speech. So that count as a secondary source.
Yes, so that would be a secondary source where he is recording something that happened after it happened. Primary sources are from people that were there. So a good
I'll give
example,
a fictional example like Anne Frank's diary, a completely fictional example, but
yeah, I was going to say a good example is the Gospel of Luke compared to the Gospel of John. Luke's gospel is a secondary source. Luke is recording eyewitness events, but he's not crediting who he's interviewing. He's amalgamating it. John was there.
I can't remember who I heard this, but I know some historians, some like biblical textual historians. Like I don't know the exact term because there's so many people who study the Bible. Because for obvious reasons, there's so many different like sub studies involved in it. So I don't know what you call someone who is a textual historian of the Bible. If that's what they call it, that's what they call it, I guess.
Yeah.
Who they claim that one of John's sources was Mary, which makes sense to me given how Jesus gave him to be married to her. And whether that's true or not, it's cool enough that I'm going to accept that as true.
Yeah.
You know,
and that
but I don't know. It's just cool.
Like John wasn't there when Jesus was born, right? Like he wasn't there before he was called. Things like that.
Biblical scholars. No, biblical scholars, it feels like has a wide range of topics, David. Sorry, David's commenting.
Yeah.
I think biblical scholars covers such a wide range of topics there. It feels like too generalized the term for what I was trying to say.
Yeah. I get what you're saying there, Caleb.
Yeah. Let's see what else I want. Oh, no, real quick, I'm gonna jump to just while we're talking Twitter, I'm gonna jump to some of the questions I got DM'd or asked on Twitter.
Yeah.
This one comes from Mike of Paul, Aerospace Christian. History. What is it and why it be like that?
The most generalized definition I can give is history is the written record of mankind. If it's not written down, it's not history. And it be like that because mankind is bad at writing things down and bad in general.
That is very true. So if someone wanted to get started in studying history, where would you say is like, not like we'll go into time periods next, but like where would you say is a good introductory book or introductory, like if someone wanted to get started studying history, where would you direct them? What would you recommend? I know it's a very general question because history is, old. History goes back forever. But where would you say someone should like? What's a good? Like, I know a lot of people say Tom Holland books are like a good way to start reading history because he has a very easy reading style.
Yeah. I would say find what interests you personally and then branch out from there. That's the nice thing about history compared to other subjects in schooling is math. You got to start at the basics and build your way up. Science, generally speaking, you start at a ground level, you work your way up, although science is more siloed than math. History, unless you start right now and work backwards, or start at the Garden of Eden and work forwards, anywhere you jump in, you can both deep dive that section. You could spend your entire life studying the year 1705 and learn everything there is to know about what happened that year, or you can pick a spot and you can branch forwards and backwards from it. So find what interests you and then work out from there would be my suggestion. I remember falling in love with history playing the Age of Empires and Civilization games, and I would spend hours reading the little encyclopedias that went along with it.
That is some uber nerd stuff right there.
Yeah.
I respect it. This is a fun question. I was reading Chesterton's short history of England.
Okay.
It's very enjoyable. I will say I don't think I fully got it. Got out of it all that was to be got out of it because I'm not English. He assumes a lot on the reader. It'd be so like if I wrote a history about America, I could assume a lot from the American reader. I could not assume a lot from other readers. He does the same with England. So he just references, what's his name? He references Beckett.
Yeah.
And then like 2 chapters later, then he explains a little bit more about Beckett. But I still don't really know who Beckett is in this context. I heard Beckett. I saw Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes.
So he assumes a lot, and so he has a lot of good stuff in the book, and I would love to go back to once I have a better understanding of English history. Once I decide where I'm going to start with my English history is King Arthur. And so I'm going to start with old King Arthur stories, and then go from there. Actually find historical stories after that, but start with King Arthur.
Okay.
But anyway, in the book, he mentioned history. Most people do history studying. They pick a time and go forward. And he said, if you a good way to do it would be to pick something you like and then today and study it backwards. So you say you pick a lamppost and study the lamppost from the lamppost to lights to electricity to fire, and then study it backwards, studying history backwards from current trends and events. What I found that to be a pretty interesting idea. What's your take on that? Is people do history forward, backwards? Does it depend on what specific thing they want to study is, or is that more of a personal decision as well?
I really like that idea because what that lets you do is it lets you ask why and work your way back. You look at something that's happening today, something that exists today, and you can look at it and you can say, why is that there? And work your way backwards, which is a very Chestertonian idea, like with his fence, right? You find out why is it there, work your way backwards from it. And you can do that about anything that's going on in the world today. You can look at, okay, why is why is the Suez Canal important? And you can work your way backwards hundreds of years on that question. Why does the United States care about what happens in whatever place? And you can work your way backwards from that. And I really like that idea. It is not, unfortunately, it's not well suited to teach history that way in schools just because of students moving around and things like that. If you started backwards with a student, it would probably throw them off unless you had control of the Department of Education and made that a top-down transformation.
If I only I continued running for president and then drop out, we could have solved this.
Yes.
I think a lot of people nowadays, when they go to history, they're seeing things happen today, and then they're kind of curious about well, actually, before I get to that next point, let me back up a little bit. There's a really it seems like the generations, like my generation, our generation, maybe generation ahead of us, the older millennials, really were just taught a lot of propaganda, which itself was bad. Gen Alpha and younger Gen Z know really nothing about history. I met a guy who didn't know what World War II was.
Yeah, that
You know?
that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
The millennials, the older Gen C, a lot of them they were taught lies and believed them.
Mm.
What I have noticed is that Gen Alpha, younger Gen Z, just assume that they are being lied to and
Yeah.
don't take in anything because of
Mm.
it.
Which is, I gotta say, I find maybe I think that's a good trend. I don't think it's good in and of itself, but I think where it's trending is good because I was able to explain the actual, you know, I was able to explain the Bolsheviks coming over the border after World War One and Germany not being able to protect their borders and the influx of porn and inflation rules and the German Institute of Sexology and all those things with zero pushback.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all benefits I think that are going to be coming out of this. If the other thing this is going to be a bit more of a political thing. We have to make history interesting to people. Like, who's very popular on Twitter and TikTok right now is that Roman Helmet guy who makes those fun edits about historical figures.
Yep.
Which honestly, I love that because that kind of goes back to the great man approach of history, which is how I think history should be done. Plutarch should be required reading, in my opinion. His Roman and Greek lives are probably my favorite history books.
Okay, yeah. That gets into a little bit of historiography, the study of history. How do you even approach history as a topic? There's a good book on it, on historiography, called History and Fallacies by Carl Trueman, who kind of a boomer con, Christian, Presbyterian, like not an enemy writing this book, but definitely like old guard, complete normie. So the book is good, but you just have to be aware of that going into it.
It's like your uncle on Thanksgiving when he agrees with you. You're like, you agree with me, but you don't. If you knew what I actually saw, you wouldn't be agreeing with me.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. And I really like his book on historiography, and he points out that there are three perspectives on history, and I'm blanking on what. Oh, yes, the three perspectives on history are cyclical, which is what kind of ancient Greeks believed. If you look at their mythologies, it's
Isn't
like, hey,
isn't that also what Spengler held to?
Yes.
Cyclical history. Okay. I know. Academic agents very big on that.
Yeah, so we have cycles that repeat through history. You look at Greek mythology, and you have the progenitors or whatever they're called who were before the Titans, and then you have the Titans, and then you have the gods, and it's this cycle that's repeating itself. You have progressive history, which is just this idea that as time goes on, things get better. And things always have to keep getting better. And that's a very humanistic view of it. And that's kind of like the meme where it's like, no one in the 50s was happy. Yes. Because if people in the 50s were happy, it means things aren't getting better. The past has to be worse than it is right now. Otherwise, progress isn't happening. And then the third view of history he gives is the providential view, that God is influencing events towards a specific end goal that will eventually happen.
I'm glad you got to that one because I was actually going to ask. I was reading Academic Agents' Prophets of Doom, which is all on like the cyclical history and the main from ancient days to now, people who were like talking about it. And he said in an interview he wanted to include a Christian figure like Saint Augustine, but he realized Christians really don't have a cyclical view, and we don't have a wig. I think he claimed we had more of a wig view, which I don't think is accurate. I think one of the key things in Revelations is that it is going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
So I do like the providential view you brought up. That I think that's actually the correct lens of how Christians should be viewing history.
And what I like, he doesn't talk about the great man view of history, that idea. I'm laughing at Springhouse's comment, things are getting better in this economy. Nope. But he doesn't include the great man idea, but you can see it fitting into any of the three. Cycles are pushed by great men. Progress is happening through great men, or God is working through great men.
Now, I think I remember I said this a while ago. A friend of mine was driving past the local public school here, which is just awful. If anyone knows about the Bartow schooling system, they know it's just not great. It's a joke.
People used to fly Bartow principals all over the country to speak at conferences.
For real.
For real. Florida used to have the third best education system in the country.
You're joking.
I'm not joking. In the late 90s, Florida was rated top 3.
What happened?
I could talk about that for a long time. That's what I wrote my final paper on in college. What happened.
Well, that's the second podcast we're gonna have to schedule again for the future, because I want to hear that.
I would love to talk about that at another time.
Because that sounds interesting. I was thinking about great men history because I was listening to, I think it's Andrew Roberts' book Napoleon, which is, if anyone hasn't listened to that yet, definitely check it out. It's it's probably the most enjoyable. I always get this wrong. Biography.
Autobiography would be Napoleon wrote it.
Yes, biographies. Which I think Napoleon wrote memoirs, didn't he? I think he wrote a political memoir. Anyways, a great biography of Napoleon. And one of the key things I know is that Napoleon, as a case, that he loved reading about the great men of history, because as a case that he went to was all done by people who were building the great man theory. And so he just wanted to be Alexander. He wanted to be Napoleon. The whole reason he wanted to go to India was just so he can go past where Alexander went. I don't think he had any value in India, because what value is there in India? But he wanted to go past where Alexander went. And I don't know. I think his great men of history really, how do I put this? There are no, we denigrate ideas of great men, even in our fiction and superheroes now. I think Green Goblin said it best in the first Spider-Man film. They love a hero, but they love to see a hero fail.
Yeah.
That movie was just ahead of its time. Speaking of super, it's incredible.
I mean, really, we peaked in superhero movies with the first few superhero movies.
Yeah, Spider-Man 1 and 2. And I'll even defend Spider-Man 3. Yeah. I'm going to go on a little tangent. The end of Spider-Man 3, when Tobey Maguire forgives Flip Marko for killing his uncle, that's what the new Spider-Man game was missing. There's a whole little cutscene in the end of the new Spider-Man game where Miles straight up says he can't forgive the guy, can't forgive Lee for killing his dad. And it's like, that's the opposite of what it should be. The point should be that he forgives him anyway.
Yes.
That's the whole point. I don't want to get into that little rant about Spider-Man game because it sucked. But
so Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, based in forgiveness pilled.
Yes.
New Spider-Man, cringe and vengeance pilled.
So stupid. Then you have Andrew Garfield Spider-Man straight up saying breaking promises is the best kind. It's like, shut the fuck up. As much as I like Andrew Garfield as an actor because he was in Hacksaw Ridge, that ending line of Amazing Spider-Man was just awful.
Yes.
But anyway, we don't really have great men. I feel like great man theory of history is not only a great way to study history because you get to read about the greats and how cool they were, incredibly motivational for young men. Mm-hmm. You see these great men in action,
That is almost certainly the reason it is so pushed back against in academic circles. Mm-hmm. They don't want people inspired by reading this because you get a Napoleon. When you have young autistic men who love reading about cool people from the past, you get Napoleon.
So true.
That's what happens. And so no, you instead we get movies like, I haven't watched it yet, but everything I heard, the new Ridley Scott Napoleon movie where
I haven't heard anything good yet either.
Exactly.
Which is a shame.
Like the half the movie is about his relationship with his first wife, and the fact that she's his first wife should tell you that wasn't the focus of his life.
I can't remember. There's a great quote. I think it's like one of Napoleon's sons who said Josephine was not the woman Napoleon should have married. She was a cruel, vindictive woman, and he had like a whole it's like 3 paragraphs about how much he could not stand Josephine and how much he crippled his dad. And I'm like, so true, so true.
You gotta have that Sigma grind set.
There's a great there's a great meme, and it's of a solar system, and it has the Napoleon on the horse overlay on the solar system, and it says the Napoleonic Empire if we didn't marry that bitch. And that's just the meme, and it's a great meme.
That is funny.
That's the thing about history. Talking to my friends about history or my coworkers, and they say history's boring. You're just hearing about old people doing things that don't really matter anymore. I'm like, you get to read about Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon.
Yeah,
like we had a moment at work where we changed up exactly how we did something, and I said the die has been cast. We've crossed the Rubicon. No one got it. No one got it. There's no culture. That's the same.
Yeah, that makes me think of what Cato posted, ironically enough, when you asked for questions. His meme where it's the modern historian, oh, the price of bananas went up by 3%, so we know inflation was hitting this part of blah, 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 blah. And the ancient historian is, I wasn't there. Let me tell you about a dream my cousin had about the speeches, word for word.
Beautiful.
And it makes me think of how people from our generation and younger, instead of saying so-and-so said this, we'll say, so-and-so was like, and we might not give an exact quote, but we're giving the gist of it. And capturing that essence of the events, the spirit of the event, was what was important to those ancient historians, rather than capturing the letter of the events.
Well, it's such a materialistic way of viewing. Like it's the same way science and philosophy have been plagued by materialism. History has now been plagued by like this consumerism almost, where it's like, well, here's the inflation rate. It's like much as I like some of Rothbard's history. Like I really like his book on education, the history of education. I think is very good. But you try to read like some of his other history, like the history of money and banking in America, or Conceived in Liberty. And I'm like, I don't care about the corn laws. I don't care. I'm sorry, Rothbard. I'm sure they had some effect on something. I don't care. Tell me what happened, who caused them, and who got rid of them. I don't need to know the effects of all the corn laws. I don't care.
Right. Yeah. So giving us the I think of like Tacitus telling us about the speech that the Scottish, he wasn't Scottish, they weren't called Scotland yet, but the Scottish chieftain gave in the battle before fighting against the Romans. It's such a good speech. Was it said? Almost certainly not. Like Tacitus was probably making it up, but it captures all of the ideas that he knows that they had, that people who didn't want to join the Roman Empire had. And he puts it in the mouth of this enemy chieftain so he doesn't get in trouble for saying them. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, speaking of great historical speeches, I implore everyone, go pick up the history of the Peloponnesian War from was it Thucydides?
History of the Peloponnesian War was yes.
Okay, pick it up. Listen to the first speech. Go before you even start the full book. Listen to the first speech from each side. Pick a side and then read it through that lens. It is actually a lot more fun to listen to all of the like I immediately picked Spartans. I'm like, okay, this is my side now, because I actually like the this opening speech when they were all trying to convince the guy to go to war, and he's like, here's why we shouldn't go to war, and he's like, that's a good point, however, here's why we should again. The speeches are engaging, and you're convinced by him. And the next guy's speech, well, he made a good point, and you kind of feel like you're in the room, like that's a good point, but that's also a good point. I'm with him, not I'm with him, and it makes it so much more. It feels alive. It feels more like something actually happened. And were the speeches accurate? I don't know. But he wasn't there. I think it was written maybe. I think it was written decades later. Did he transcribe the speeches, or did he kind of guess them? Did he ask people who were there? I don't know. But it captures the spirit of the age, I think, in a much better way that any book written today about it would be, unless it was by Tom Holland or something.
Jared, I'm trying to train myself to always pronounce the C with a K when it's in Latin, because that's how it was to them. If it is Tacitus, I know that's what 99% of people say, but I'm just trying to get myself in that habit.
Oh, that's cool. He's commenting from Twitter. I didn't know StreamYard would show Twitter comments now.
I have no idea. I'm just looking there.
No, I just know he has an X next to everyone else's YouTube on theirs.
Oh yeah.
So I guess that okay, that's cool. I didn't know you can get comments from Twitter now. That's nice. Neat. But yeah, there's so many. This is the thing I've been trying to do. I've been trying to listen to, like, I was reading about the Peloponnesian War, or I was listening to I count the trial and death of Socrates has this as much history as philosophy as fiction. I count them as archery. I don't care. But then I realize I get so much more out of Plato once I finish reading Homer. You know, once I finish reading the kind of the fiction that inspired the age, or the story or the mysteries that inspired the age. And now that's why when I said earlier, when I'm reading about English history, I started with King Arthur. I think that's also a important thing, that when you're reading about the Renaissance, you know, read some Dante, you know, then go into it, you know, just to get a sense of the age. Even if it's like a later fiction or an earlier fiction, just get a sense of like the ideas of the mythos that were in their minds. Because the idea people are not inspired by great fictional stories really only makes sense today. You know, people back then were definitely inspired by fictional stories, especially if they were told they were actual events.
Yeah, and it would be like, I don't know, people approach history today like, imagine you are approaching Christianity by only reading theology books and never actually reading the Gospels, never reading an actual Bible story, just the theology. That's how people engage with history. Of course it's boring.
Yeah. It's that's a great one. A great period. That's the other thing. I when it comes to but I feel like the fiction thing, when you get to the French Revolution, that's when I feel like the history is already so exciting. And so you can see how to put this. Because at that time period, they were so influenced by, but also begin to not care as much, you know, about those previous historical events. You really had like the beginning of, I'm sure Chesterton has some great term or great little coined phrase to describe these people. I don't know what it is. I'm sure it's out there. But it's always now, you know, that kind of attitude where it's now, who cares about what happened before?
Yeah.
That really began to kick off a thing around like after the French Revolution. And so because I don't think reading Les Mis is really going to help with your understanding of the French Revolution. It might. I can't get past the second chapter, so maybe I'm wrong. But it's just so boring. I don't really think it makes a difference.
Well, yeah, and you look at the philosophy of the French Revolution was so. I don't know how people can look at the events and not go, these guys are just communists. They destroyed the tombs of all the kings that were buried in Paris. It was so anti-history, and just this, they wanted to change the dating to be from right now at the French Revolution. It was so it was just this eternal now rather than we're building on anything.
Yeah.
And I think that comes through in their literature also, like you said.
Yeah, it's I would say I would defend. I think the same guy wrote Les Mis also wrote Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I have not read, but I love the Disney film. You know, so I'll give that one a pass if it's any good. I don't know. Is there any? Not to think about. I can't think of any good like stories written around the time of the Revolutionary War or the early Americas. You know,
early American like fiction stories.
Yeah, we had folk tales, you know, folk stories, you know, but I can't think of any like epic fictional stories that I could pair with that time period. Can you think of any?
Not off the top of my head. I was gonna check when Dumas was writing, because I like his books. But so he was born in 1802. Died in 1870. Alexander Dumas, French author, and he wrote like The Count of Monte Cristo, Three Musketeers, and I enjoy both of those books a lot. And I think they help you kind of understand that.
Need more period adaptations like Gladiator excelled despite historical inaccuracies. Agreed. I would say I think the best. This might be a hot take, but I think the best like historical movie like that is 300 by Zack Snyder. Because I love the fact that the guy who's narrating it is the runner who went back and brought the troops and is inspired with all the troops to go forward. So any exaggeration about monsters makes sense from trying to inspire the troops.
Yeah,
it all just works. It works so well.
Yeah, 300. It's great, and it's the Indiana Jones issue where a lot of historians and archaeologists hate Indiana Jones because he doesn't do it right. He's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, whatever. And then you get a minority of historians and archaeologists who love Indiana Jones because he gets young people interested in history and archaeology. And a movie that takes exaggerations or embellishments with the past that is interesting is so much better than one that tries to be 100% period accurate. Think of Mel Gibson movies, The Patriot, Braveheart. Yeah.
Oh, The Patriot is one of the best movies about America.
Oh, it's so good. It's
so
fantastic. Great movie. Is it 100% historically accurate? No, they're not making 100-yard pot shots with a flintlock pistol to hit a guy in the back who's riding a horse. That's not really happening. But the movie is so good.
Yeah. I feel like the only time I won't accept historical inaccuracies about a movie if it takes place during the Confederacy. That's the only time I won't accept historical inaccuracies. Like, what was that movie? What was it called? The movie about Quakers during the Civil War.
I don't know it.
Oh, it's gonna bug me now. I have it on DVD. It was a movie about Quakers in the Civil War, and it's about how the dad and the son want to go off and fight in the Civil War, and the mom and the daughter's like, "No, we're Quakers. We don't do that. We don't do that kind of stuff." And of course, it had the South marching north and pillars in.
Of course, as
they
didn't ever do.
Exactly. I remember watching it after I realized that. I watched it like way younger, and after reading more about after reading Thomas DiLorenzo, watched it again. I'm like, oh my god, I cannot enjoy this anymore. I hate it. Are there any good Confederacy movies about the Confederacy?
Good.
God and Zen Wars. What's that? Write that down. God and
Generals. Is pretty good. I know.
Please say it's I wonder what we mentioned what do you think about that? We mentioned archaeologists and like not some of them not like Indiana Jones and some do. I wonder what the archaeological consensus is on someone like Daniel Jackson from Stargate. Because that's probably the coolest archaeologist ever. He's just like, no, it was aliens, and then here's Sora, and here's all the Asgard spaceships, and it's cool. Like that's the coolest one.
You know what? I should ask. I had a great archaeology professor. I should ask him if he ever watched Stargate and what he thought about it.
Oh, if you ever do, let me know, because that's another great one actually. Stargate's. I could go on a whole rant about I think why Stargate is probably the coolest sci-fi. Like I was a huge Star Trek fan, so I finished off Stargate. Stargate's Atlantis and the universe and all of it, just phenomenal. From beginning to end, all 10 seasons, all 5 of Atlantis, all 2, sadly only 2 of universe. Fantastic sci-fi. Anyone listening to go check it out.
Yes, 100%. Stargate, 10 out of 10 show. I never watched through Atlantis, but I did watch the first season of Universe.
I loved Universe because basically by halfway through season 2, even the atheist character was kind of like, no, this might be God, and here's like I might believe in divine providence now.
Yeah,
Like even the aces goes to a whole conversion where he tries to be nice to people now, and no one trusts him because he's like, I can't deny this is probably God, guys.
That's funny. Yeah, Stargate
it's awesome.
Was Stargate and Psych were the I would get home from school, and one of those two my older brother would be watching, so I would just watch
Psych
it
was
with
so
him.
good.
Psych is hands down the best Sherlock Holmes adaptation.
Oh, absolutely. People try to say like the it's Monk or it's the what's the other one?
The Mentalist.
The Mentalist was awful. I couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
And then you had the what was the Elementary? Was that the American Sherlock Holmes?
Yeah, that was the American one.
Was Curtis Yarvin? Curtis Yarvin was in it.
Mm-hmm.
Which was hilarious. I give it past the BBC Sherlock because has Martin Freeman in it.
Yeah,
and he played Bilbo, and he also complained about gay people and might have hit his wife at one point. And I give him a pass.
No, honestly, I wished we had gotten more of the Robert Downey Jr. movie.
Yeah, it was good
instead of more Marvel stuff, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Like Jared said, more historical period adaptations of things. Sure, it was steampunky, but it was, hey, here's 1900s, early 1900s, late 1800s London.
What was that steampunk Three Musketeers that came out a while ago where they had like a battle on flying blimps?
Yeah, that was weird. If you want to watch,
it's fun though.
Orlando Bloom as the Duke of Buckingham and all that. If you want to watch a good the Disney Three Musketeers from 1990 or 1995,
that's a good one
right now, with Chris O'Donnell as D'Artagnan, Kiefer Sutherland. That one is fantastic.
I remember the scene when they all go running at the guys to the opening fire app, and they all kind of like close their eyes and deliberately miss.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great scene.
Charlie Sheen plays a priest. It's fantastic.
He did. That's right.
Okay. Garrett, best Sherlock, best everything was Wishbone. Okay, the best version of the Odyssey, the Wishbone. The best version of Robin, Wishbone. All of it.
What was I don't know what that is. What's Wishbone?
Oh, you're younger than me. Wishbone was a TV show about a dog named Wishbone who would act out classic novels and stories, and he would be the main character in them.
I mean, I just saw a photo of him pulling back a bow like he's Robin Hood.
That's the end of the Odyssey, where he has to shoot the arrow through all the axes. That's if you're interested in history, that's where you start. Wishbone.
Wishbone, beginning of history. Okay, I write it down. Wishbone. Back to history because I've enjoyed a little this like talking about fiction and history. Because I think like if you really wanted to understand what the Greeks thought of the like reading Herodotus, but then also reading like the Greek tragedies about Persia and stuff, that's a really good combo.
Yeah, read their plays, get in the mindset, and then you can understand, like, oh, when they write this down, it means this, because the poets and the historians and the philosophers, that was one guy. it was one person doing all of those things. Plato was in the battles that are being talked about.
Socrates was a soldier in the Peloponnesian War as a hoplite, which I always find that I have to bring it up every time someone talks about Socrates because it's some like dumb philosopher guy. I'm like, he was also a veteran. Yeah, I remember that. Like, this wasn't just some guy convincing the youth. This was a respected veteran who had major complaints against the new government. This is why there's so many reasons to kill him.
Yeah, this was a decorated war hero. That's why they were afraid of him becoming a king.
Yeah. There was I think one of the stories, I think it was Alcibiades. Not maybe Alcibiades. He had a student of his, possibly a level, or at least how levels worked in Greece, because there's different accounts of whether it was gay or it was cuddling, a bunch of different accounts there. Yeah. But the guy saw on the ankle or something, and Socrates jumped in and defended him for like several minutes while waiting for reinforcements, single-handedly. So he was not just some dumb wise guy who walked around asking questions. You know, he could probably kick your ass.
Exactly.
So it's something I think is very important to remember. But like, why did no one smack Socrates? He was so snarky. It's like, well, he could probably kill you. That's why.
Right. That is awesome, Ancient Gardener. Just looking at your comment there, that's really cool. Yeah, when Plato's like, oh yeah, we should have philosopher kings who control everything, and they should be me. Like, okay, he's getting that straight from Socrates, who was in a position to make that happen.
Yes. That's a fun period to study.
Yeah, that reminded me of something. When you're reading anything ancient Greeks or anything old, an important thing to keep in mind when you're reading them is, generally speaking, they are not trying to deceive you. The two assumptions people go into history a lot of the time with is, one, this person is lying. Again, everyone today is lying, and so that's an easy thing to get into, of this assumption that, okay, this person is lying, they're leaving something out, they're trying to pull one over on me. They're not trying to pull one over on you. They've been dead for 3,000 years. They don't care, and they're take them at face value. And then the other assumption people have when they go into history is that people in the past were stupid. That's just a general assumption people make. Oh, these people were idiots because they believed X, Y, and Z thing that I know is clearly wrong.
Gonna blame Whig theory for that one. Gonna blame Whig theory of history for that one.
Oh.
The Whig theory. I'm gonna blame that. I'm blame that on that attitude on that one.
Yeah. So people start reading ancient history and they assume that these people are lying and or stupid. And that's where you get this just incredible distrust of ancient sources. Like, people have been reading the Iliad literally for thousands of years, and for a lot of that time, people thought it was fiction. No one knew where the city of Troy was. No one had found it. Clearly, it didn't actually happen, because we would know where this giant city was. Until some guy just went to the place where the Iliad says Troy was and started digging, and he found it. Because he assumed that Homer was both intelligent enough to record it correctly and being honest with him, and he dug up Troy.
It's so funny because it's such an obvious thing to do, right? Like, it's like, oh, well, we don't know what this is clearly fake. We don't know what Troy is. Like, well, did you go look where Homer said it was? Why would we do that? He's clearly lying to us.
Right.
Like, that's so freaking stupid.
It is. It's just such a dumb thing. And a lot of people will reference like the numbers given in battles, where it's like, oh, there were 1 million Persians up against 10,000 Greek soldiers. And then you actually look into how that gets recorded, especially for Roman battles, with how organized the Roman legion was. Whenever a Roman source is giving you the number of Roman soldiers in a battle, they're only counting foot legionaries. They're not counting auxiliaries. They're not counting recruits. They're not counting the mounted equestrians. They're only counting foot legionaries. And then they're looking at the enemy army and they're counting everyone, because they don't know who's who. And that's where we get these huge disparities in numbers, and people just look at, 10,000 versus 1 million. That didn't happen. That's a lie. I'm ignoring what this person says.
I feel like there's gonna be a whole series of things like a podcast I could do about it was science, was philosophy, was history, the anti-whimsy people. Because I've been on a kick about the whole, like, no, dragons were real. Gay scientists in the 1800s labeled them more dinosaurs. Okay, just to deliberately de-whimsify everything. Like this is so. It seems even more apparent. It seems to be appealing more and more apparent to me. It's I don't know if it's like it's so obvious and apparent now. I'm convinced there's some secret cabal of anti-whimsy nerds who just hate everything. And you know where they are? They're in the tunnels.
Well, and it's the same thing with biblical archaeology. People read atheists look at the Bible and they assume that it's lying to them or it was written by idiots.
Dawkins.
And now with the nation state of Israel, they won't let Christians dig anywhere. Who are trying to prove things. They're banning Christian archaeologists from even entering Israel because we want to actually prove the Bible happened. But every time they do let us dig, we find evidence that reinforces everything the Bible says. We find coins with the names of high priests and prophets and kings on them from the Bible. And then the people who own the land get the phone call to shut it down. There's a guy, I don't know how true it is. He says he found the Ark of the Covenant. He got kicked out of Israel and hasn't been allowed back in for the last 30 years now. Like, they won't even let him, like, he told people and they won't even let him go to where it's supposed to be. And this is the same guy who did find a ton of relics from the old temple, but he had to do it all semi-illegally because they didn't actually want him digging.
I'm now just imagining like black ops archaeologists sneaking in a couple of night.
Yeah, like he did. He would only dig at night, and he found a bowl of incense from Solomon's temple. Yeah. My dad was on that dig actually, and he was able to sneak a little bit of it out of the country in
that's cool.
In an old film canister. Like, because this was back in the day, so he opened one up, took the film out, and put incense from this pot that they dug up from Solomon's temple into the film canister and brought it out because they don't X-ray film canisters. Tip for everyone: they don't X-ray film canisters.
Oh, that's gonna affect. That's it. This is going your permanent UCFO record.
Oh, I'm sure.
Can't get any longer, can it?
Right. I've already seen what I wanted to see in Israel. I don't need to get back in there.
I want to ask you, because this is actually I know this is like a field study people have been trying to do more of lately, is the Exodus, where all the Jews leaving Egypt. And there's a lot of atheists, anti-whimsy historians trying to say it never happened. Here's all the reasons why for it. The best argument I heard, sadly, came from Ben Shapiro, and it was that the Egyptians were really good propagandists. They never recorded a single loss. What do you take of that argument?
That as an argument that the Exodus didn't happen, because
the Exodus did happen. It did happen, but we have no good evidence for it from the Egyptians because they don't record any losses.
Yeah, that tracks with Egyptian history, but there's also, I think it's the transition from the 18th to 19th dynasty in Egypt. People try to use, I believe it's those two. It might be the 17th to the 18th. It might be the 19th to the 20th. But that transition people use a lot to say, like, oh, this is what really happened, because it lines up with the time period of when the Exodus was supposed to be. And the story of that transition is that a large group of people of Semitic people came in from the north and like had a coup and took over Egypt. And then a new pharaoh took over. It started a civil war, and he kicked all of those people out of Egypt after the civil war with them. And so people look at that and go, oh, see, that's what really happened. It was a civil war. It wasn't God doing a bunch of miracles and stuff. and they weren't the Hebrews. They were just these random other Semitic people that never existed before or after, and all this stuff. But you look at the perspective of the Egyptians on the Exodus, especially the ones who were alive after it happened.
Mhm.
Joseph comes in, he's a slave from who knows where, and then he's vizier, second in command of the whole country, and then he brings his whole family in. That sounds a lot like a coup to me.
Fair enough.
And like, okay, they all become enslaved. That like the Bible doesn't tell us what that process looked like, but I can't imagine it was a peaceful transition into slavery for the children of the vizier.
Mm.
That's just my 2 cents.
No, that tracks. I like that. That seems reasonable to me.
On that, yeah. It's the same. History and science go hand in hand with that. Where if you anything that disproves the Bible, I put that in air quotes that no one can see. If you look at it for 30 seconds and apply some logic to it, you can see where it does fit with Scripture.
Mm. Yeah, no, that seems that's my experience as well. It seems like every time I hear an argument, I'm like, well, let's think about that for 30 seconds. You know, what is most atheist arguments nowadays? I feel like I think you saw my rant earlier on Twitter about the whole religion is boils down to be a good person. It's like your entire concept of good would not exist. Shut up.
Yes, I remember a while ago getting into an argument with a lady, and she's like, I don't need the Bible to tell me what's right and wrong. I just follow the golden rule: treat others the way I want to be treated.
That's
a great Bible verse you got there.
When someone says that, I want to strangle you for being like, you don't realize everything you believe would not exist if it was not if you were not raised in the AO Christianity belt. Shut up.
Yeah, it's a similar thing I was reading the other day where it was talking about how the average person today is at such a disadvantage when approaching history. I'll tie all this back in because the Bible itself is a historical document, and it gives you insight into almost 4,000 years of history, from the garden to the Roman Empire period. You're able to look at many different regions, many different kinds of writing, different kinds of history, different kinds of poetry, and get in the mindsets of all these different people. And I imagine it's somewhat like languages where I haven't learned another language besides English successfully, but what I'm told is each language you learn makes it easier to learn the next one. When you're able to get into the mindset of one culture, it makes it easier to get into the mindset of another culture, in my opinion. And so someone who's well-read in Scripture has such a breadth of knowledge about ancient history to dive into it off of, that someone who hasn't read their Bible at all is just missing.
That makes sense. That tracks. I want to ask, the last question I want to go to before we wrap it up. It seems people, like I said earlier, they don't really Zen Alpha doesn't really know anything about history, but then they see these TikToks or they see these memes, about Napoleon or from the Roman helmet guy on TikTok, or surprisingly, there's a lot of really funny, really good like World War II Nazi propaganda on TikTok. I don't think any of them actually know anything about the time period. They just know it pisses off the people who are fat and ugly, and so they go with it.
Yeah.
But it seems like how to put this. They start studying history. It seems like when I was younger and people wanted to start studying history, they pick something like a Revolutionary War, and it seems like people nowadays pick something like World War I or World War II to start their study. What do you think it is that I'm not really sure the question is though. It's just an observation I've noticed that people are going back in my life. Everyone know about Revolutionary War. Everyone wants to know about Civil War. Now everybody wants to know about World War II. Is it that people just can't think as far back, so they just go into more recent events? These more recent events have more of an impact on today, so either go into it, or maybe it's that when I was younger, the Missiles of America was the Revolutionary War. Now the Missiles of America really does just seem FDR, World War I, World War II time period. So they're going back to what do you think is the cause for people going back to these time periods instead of going back to Greece and Rome and medieval England, that kind of stuff? If you had to guess, what would you think is happening?
I think it is about the looming specter of the past. When it's kind of like how 100 years ago, 100 years ago, people talked about Napoleon roughly the way we talk about Hitler now. Napoleon was evil incarnate. He ravaged Europe. He destroyed the lives of millions. He was a monster. 100 years later, Napoleon, great general that many look back upon fondly because he got replaced in the, I don't know what term you want to use for it, but he was replaced by Hitler, who's now the monster, killed millions, ravaged Europe. And until we get something else, that's going to be the guy. And so our hero is, again in air quotes, is FDR, who stopped Hitler. Before, our hero was George Washington. For some, it was George Washington. For some, it would have been Abraham Lincoln, who saved the Union. I put that in air quotes again. Jared, don't hate me. So people do really have a recency bias. And I think for the foreseeable future, it's going to be World War II. But we might get lucky, and whoever comes after Trump may be the new replacement, is my prediction.
That'd be interesting. Because I think anytime I see a lot of people, like my cousin, doesn't really know much, but he doesn't really know a whole lot of history. But he loves World War II Germany because he loves the aesthetics. Yeah, he's a super lib pansexual, and he loves he's very supportive of everything you can't stand. He's very supportive of, but he's constantly talking about Hitler, which is very funny.
I mean, that makes me think almost of when they were talking about AIDS patient 0 and doing all those reports, and they're like, yeah, all of the gays who died of AIDS first were the ones who go out in Nazi gear and all of that stuff. And it's just like the aesthetic is appealing to everyone.
But I can't imagine studying World War II without having at least a really good grasp of World War I, if not with the Treaty of Versailles and everything after World War I, And if you study World War I, you got to just get into how that really was a war between democracy and the monarchies. And if anyone wants the great stuff on World War I, anything by Erich von Knut-Leden, anything by that guy, like Monarchy and War, is, I think I've read Monarchy and War maybe more than, I think Plato's Symposium and Monarchy and War are my most read books. Yeah. And Monarchy and War is just incredible.
Yep. Very, very good book.
So anyone should check it out. I think it's on Mises Institute. I think it's for free. So I on YouTube from Skeptical Waves for free. So you can take it out today or tomorrow. It's really good.
That kind of gets into what we talked about at the beginning of the show, though. Studying history forwards or backwards. If you study it backwards, you're going to be confused, but you get the answer to your question immediately. If you study history forwards from the beginning to today, at no point will you be confused as to why things are happening, but whatever question you started with doesn't get answered until you've learned thousands of years of history.
This is I have one more final question. I was listening to what's it called? Old Sundel, which was Joseph Pierce wrote a biography of Hilaire Belloc.
Okay.
anyone check it out. It's really good because it delves a lot into Belloc's personal life and a lot more of like his friends and his family issues. And Belloc traveled a lot. I don't know if you know the story or not, but when he was like 19, he wanted to go see. He met a girl once, wanted to marry her, and the mom said no, she's going to be a nun, and took her to California. And so he went on a boat from England to New York, and then hitchhiked across America by singing songs and telling poems. So this is a cool dude.
Yeah.
But anyway, Belloc wrote a lot of history books, and a lot of the modern historians hated him because they simply thought he was a propagandist for Rome. And there was some older historian who everyone kind of respected, who wrote an essay defending Belloc, when it was like, we've had our time as propagandists against Rome. It's time Rome has their defender. And that's how we defended Belloc, which I would love that. And it made me think about how much history, because history has such political implications. At least it did back then. I think it has today, but a lesser extent. How much history being written at the times is more. It's like history needs to be education or propaganda, and propaganda is education. But I mean, like in the strict sense of propaganda. So much of history is kind of just like, I'm going to interpret these facts in a way that is cool and beneficial to what I believe, or I can interpret these facts very strictly and leave my own bias out of it. I don't think anyone really can leave their bias out of it. So you're gonna have, I think, I'd rather have I'd rather read someone like, let's say, what's his name? Yuval Noah Harari, the guy who wrote *Sapiens*.
Okay.
He's straight up propagandist for materialism and atheism and all the other terrible stuff in his book on human evolution. I'd rather read that and know what his biases are, and read Belloc's book on the Reformation, where I know what his biases are towards Protestantism, than read someone who tried to claim they have no biases and sneaks in their little biases in, you know? But
yeah.
What's your take on the whole, like, history being historians often can double as propagandists? What's your take on that?
100%. Every historian has a bias, and that bias is as simple as, why am I writing this down? Why does this matter to me? And even if you write an unbiased account of something, the details you include and the details you leave out are reinforcing the story you want to tell. It reminds me of the quote from 1984: whoever controls the past controls the future, and if you control the future, you control the past. And it gets into like, what are real banned books? Not the ones you can buy in Barnes and Noble on a shelf that says banned books.
I see those, and I run to it, and I pray to God I will find someone to snuck a Camp of the Saints. It would never happen. But one day I want to find it.
How much does a copy of that run for now?
Like $1,000, I think.
Yeah, I'm not leaving that on a Barnes and Noble as a prank. But yeah, so it's even the details you include and the details you leave out are biased. Like if you're writing the story of someone's life and you think what they ate for breakfast every morning is important, that's your bias. If you think it's not, you're leaving it out, right? Regardless of what else, any political thoughts you have on the issue. So yes, having someone with an overt and known bias is a lot less dangerous than someone who claims to have none. It's kind of like Captain Jack Sparrow's a dishonest man you can trust to be dishonest. An honest man, you never know when they're going to do something very stupid.
Yes. It reminds me of the fact that, like, life is a story. There's narratives. History is a narrative, and I'd rather have my history told to me by a author who's going to tell me a narrative than someone who's just going to try to tell me the facts. And the facts interpreted through their lens. This is why I think C.S. Lewis, whenever he does write about, like, he sneaks a little historical lessons in, is very good at it. Because I think he's good at everything he writes. Yeah. Except for my hot take, I can't stand the Screwtape Letters.
Really?
I don't know what it is. I can't. I think it's just too on the nose. You know, it's just too. I think when Peter Creech wrote his like little 21st century version of it, it's just too in your face. You know.
Yeah.
But also, I love Narnia because of how in your face Aslan is Jesus. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just conflicted. Maybe I'm just a contradiction here. But
It's funny because Screw Tape Letters was his least favorite to write as well.
Mm.
He said he hated writing it, and people asked him all the time for a sequel, and he said, "Nope, never doing it. Didn't like writing it. Don't want to write it again."
Base. And I want to repeat a meme. I don't know if you saw the meme or not, but it was it was a meme of some student asking J.R. Tolkien, like, Mr. Professor Tolkien, was Lord of the Rings an allegory for your time in World War One? And it was literally, never say that to me again or I'll kill you. And it was C.S. Lewis saying, if not every single reader gets that Aslan is Jesus, I'm going to light myself on fire.
That's funny. It's also like the how they included each other in their stories. It's like, hey, C.S. Lewis, I put you in my book. Or, hey, Tolkien, I put you in my book. Oh, that's cool. What am I? You're this old professor who's really nice and knows everything and has been on a bunch of adventures and helps everyone out. And Tolkien goes, oh, I put you in my book too, C.S. Lewis. What am I? You're this old tree that talks for a long time and never gets to the point.
I would say I finally read the part of the Two Towers that have Treebeard, and I read the part of the line with the head professor, and knowing that made me love those characters even more.
Oh yeah.
Last question. I've always said it twice now, but last question, not about history. It's a double question. Favorite Lewis book, favorite Narnia book.
Okay, my favorite C.S. Lewis book is The Abolition of Man.
Oh, that's a good one. I read that for the first time last week.
Yeah, I read that about every 6 months. Especially working in education, I read that about every 6 months. I think it's phenomenal. Favorite Chronicles of Narnia book. It's been a bit since I read through the series at all. I have very, very fond memories of Voyage of the Dawn Treader. The last battle is probably the best, in my opinion, but I have very fond memories of Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
I think for me, favorite Lewis book is a tie between The Four Loves and that. I think it's the second lecture or essay in Weight of Glory when he's talking to the students at Oxford about how academics would behave during wartime.
Yeah.
I love that one. And The Four Loves. If you go on, anyone listening, go on Scribd. They have The Four Loves from Lewis, where it's a 4-part audio lecture he recorded on it, and it's in his voice, and it's really fun.
Another source for anyone looking for anything by C.S. Lewis, Project Gutenberg, has all of his books.
And favorite Narnia book is a tie. Again, it's hard for me to pick a favorite. I love The Magician's Nephew because it's so whimsical, and I could not. I think I started The Horse and His Boy this morning, and I've never tried to put a book on times 3 speed because I can't understand it. But I wanted just to know everything that was going to happen, and so I ended up pushing like times 2.5. I'm like, I gotta know what happens. I gotta know what happens. It's so good.
I love The Magician's Nephew also because everyone talks about how. Have you read the Space Trilogy?
Once I finish Narnia and Lord of the Rings, then it's the Space Trilogy.
Okay. Space Trilogy is fantastic. The third book of it, That Hideous Strength, is just a novel version of The Abolition of Man. Super, super good. But if you read The Abolition of Man and The Magician's Nephew right back to back, The Magician's Nephew also hits those beats incredibly well in a story form for children, and that is what Lewis is the master of.
He really is. Of all those like 20th century people like Lewis, Tolkien, Belloc, Chesterton, most of the thing I had the most fun with Chesterton. I think I would get the most out of talking to Lewis. I think he's something else. You know, he's also, it's so easy to read. You know, I have my complaints with Lewis is that I think he can afford to be that simplistic in his writing because he's so smart. People now don't get how deep his writing is, and then try to just keep them Mere Christianity is a great book, but it led to the ideas of mere Christianity and modern discourse, and which is now just like, well, all you really need is the mere basics of, like, Bible. Jesus is real. He's God, and nothing else. And I think that's been a disaster. And so I love Lewis. I think his popularity, and the same way, like what Pascal's ways are?
Yeah.
Okay, so the actual Pascal's ways are versus the bumper sticker Pascal's ways are is words apart. Lewis and most Lewis people today are words apart.
Yes.
And so growing up, I had disdain for Lewis because I never actually read him. I just knew people told me he said. I'm like, but that doesn't sound smart coming from you. Then you actually know more, and you go back to it. Okay, I see why you're saying it because you know all these other things as well, and it makes sense now. But when they say it and misquote it, it's not good.
Mere Christianity was fantastic because it was a radio show that anyone was supposed to be able to listen to any part of it without listening to the previous parts and get what he's talking about. That should not be the basis of your faith.
Yes, absolutely.
It was the broadcast talks, what they were called originally. That was the second most listened to radio show in Britain during World War II. The only thing that got more listeners was Winston Churchill's updates.
Wow.
I
didn't know that.
Yeah, people don't everyone was listening to C.S. Lewis. So the broadcast talks, that was like primetime news ended, then C.S. Lewis was on.
That's cool. But also it reinforces my point that it was the most for public audiences at any time kind of thing.
Right. Like that was supposed to be something anyone in England could listen to, no matter what their background was, and get what he was talking about. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Jim. Thank you so much for coming on. We have to have you on. I need to have you on again so we can have to talk about Florida history, the history of Florida education, and what happened to it, because that's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to that one. We're doing explain like I'm 5, where I can just ask the basic questions. We'll go from there. Okay.
But give your plugs. Any final thoughts? Any little tips you want to give someone starting to study history, and then final thoughts and plugs.
Not just find what you love and then learn what there is to know about it. That's really what it is. What do you like doing? Figure out where it came from, and just recognize people from before. They weren't stupid. They're not trying to trick you.
And where can people find you at?
Martyr Jim on Twitter. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Jim, thank you for coming on. Everybody, thank you for listening. I don't have much planned. I know Ein and Bold are doing the next part of the Maritain book series soon, and David Brady and I are going to do a C.S. Lewis podcast. And I tips everybody. I ordered on Amazon Turkish Delights for the podcast.
Okay.
And so that's going to be. I had one today. 10 out of 10 would betray my family to the white wits. 10 out of 10. Fully get it. But everyone, thanks for listening. Have a good night.